Dr. Jordan Konstan. Welcome.
Dean,
Welcome
thanks
to
for
this
having me.
podcast.
Thanks for coming.
Not a problem, my friend. Thanks for taking the time. I know
Yeah,
you're a
of
very
course.
busy man.
No, that's fine.
First question, very important question.
Yes.
Who do you follow in the soccer?
Soccer, depending what league.
We've got a few leagues to go through. Please tell me.
Premier League is Arsenal. Arsenal.
And?
No, that's my team.
Oh,
So,
I
yeah.
just meant locally. Do you have, like, if you were to say in the A League, did you have
In the A
somebody?
League, I was never really into it. Victory, I'd say, just because from when I was young, they were, I guess, at their peak. I'd say Victory as a longer standing support, but I've never really fully delved into the A League.
The A League's interesting. I remember when I was young, it was sort of coming about now. And now, speaking to family members that are a bit younger, and sort of growing up in that generation, soccer's becoming a lot bigger than what it was when I was young. I feel like more kids are playing it.
Yeah.
There's more local leagues and things. So
There are. I guess those senior teams and those I guess state league teams have funneled 13s, 14s, 15s, and 2 or 3 teams of each. So yeah, I guess there's definitely a lot of traction around it. It's probably still, I'd say, a little bit far behind other countries that I guess invest a little bit more into football. But you're getting a lot of different cultural backgrounds coming to Australia, and starting academies. There's different teams that they're associated with. So yeah, there's a range of opportunity.
Absolutely. I played soccer for, it was probably about 4 or 5 years when I was in, maybe 4 years when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And just talking to kids at school, like maybe there was one other kid that played soccer. It might have been the type of school I went to. It wasn't, let's call it an ethnic high school where soccer was played every day at lunchtime at some of my friends' schools.
I understand.
The reason I brought this up is because you played soccer as a young man.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've got a little bit to speak about that. But when did you first start getting into it? Were you really young?
Young. As soon as I could walk, I was kicking. And yeah, just pretty much played, as I said earlier, academies, school soccer. Unfortunately, my school wasn't, like yours, mad about soccer. So,
Sure.
I was captain of the soccer team, and it meant nothing, So I didn't have that kind of network of friends who were, kind of getting up at 2:00 in the morning to watch, United play and these types of things. But no, still loved it. And yeah, played up until recently, 26 years old. Yeah.
26 years. How old are you now?
I'll be 29 soon.
Man, you look young.
Young, yeah.
Not
I
like
shave
me.
every second day. I shave. That's,
Really?
Yeah.
Playing soccer and growing up with that, you were, as far as I understand, that was the thing that you wanted to do. You just wanted to be a soccer player. You were a fanatic about it. Something happened. You've briefly spoken to me about that. Take us through what happened and maybe how you were sort of dealing with what happened at that point in your life.
Well, I guess I was playing full time, probably towards the end of my career. I briefly started working as an osteopath, and I just felt there was something I still needed to do. So yeah, I stopped working and just took as much, I guess, invested as much energy and time into my career as I could. Tried to, see whereabouts in Melbourne I could play. I went overseas for a little bit, and I played in a league in 2nd division in Europe,
Wow.
which was a good experience. But unfortunately, as I was there, the COVID pandemic had started. So I went in January of 2020, and I was on a one-way ticket, not expecting to come back. My girlfriend, who's my wife now, she was, planning to come and visit me on her school holidays.
Yep.
But she's a teacher. But yeah, by March I was home. So a couple of months later, I was home because they'd shut the leagues. I remember it had just broken out in Italy. So as soon as into Europe, it was a little bit more concerning. So I came home, and I was fortunate enough to not have any complications coming home. But yeah, I still back in Melbourne gave it. I still wanted to see where I could end up and at what level I could play.
And the love of that sport, is that what got you into the career that you're at now, or were you already sort of thinking about that at another stage?
Well, as I said, I'd graduated before taking my soccer as serious as I did. So I'd studied straight from high school, university. And by 22 years old, I was an osteopath and practicing as one. So, I guess it was growing up. I had a lot of injuries, like most athletes would. But I started quite early, unfortunately. I had a full knee reconstruction at 11 years old.
11 years old.
So went under the knife, and they took a big graft my hamstring out, and being 11, I didn't I wouldn't say my rehab with that was as diligent as what it would be now.
Sure.
So I guess that I was already exposed to injury and rehabilitation, and trying to get back to playing a sport in the least amount of time. It was, I guess, almost second nature.
Yeah, beautiful. I didn't realize that you graduated that young and were still continuing after that, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you still play soccer now?
No, I'm
totally
done. Totally done. My last season was 2021, and that wasn't a very successful season for me. So by the end of that, it was easy for me to say, look, I've gave it a good go, but this is just, I've got to focus on my career now, which is not football. It's osteo and helping people get better.
Sure thing. What is the world of somebody like yourself? What is it like to be an osteopath? What I want to really ask with this question is for me, I'm uneducated in this area. I don't really understand. There is an osteopath, there's a physiotherapist, there's a bunch of different places you can go to, people you can see, so-called experts that can help you out. How does osteopathy differentiate from that? What is it that you guys are really, I guess, known for? Like, what are you guys really good at?
It's a question we get asked a lot, and I guess some of the main differences are in the principles that each profession bases themselves from. As an osteopath, we are taught, from day dot, that the body is a whole, the body is one. And I guess as a client, as you've come and experience yourself, we're paying as much, I pay as much attention to not only the sore area and the diagnosis of that, but why it's happening. So how different regions and different body parts affect where you're experiencing the pain. So that would be, I guess, the big fundamental difference between the two, or between the three professions that you just mentioned.
Sure.
But it's up to each practitioner. That's the beauty of healthcare, that you can be a chiro who has I guess a completely different philosophy and model, but you can branch onto that, and you can add tools and resources to implement in your service and in your practice. Yeah, you wouldn't be I guess, a traditional chiropractor. But each, healthcare professional has that opportunity to outsource information and I guess build on that and utilize it for their practice and on their own clients. And that's what I've done a lot of with my practice.
The wonderful world of the internet as well. I think it has helped that a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
You can do your own research. You can do whatever you need to do. And, it wasn't back in the day when you just had whatever, maybe you got a degree and you read some books, and that was kind of the limitation unless you bought some other books. Yeah. Whereas now you have the freedom to, as you said, just keep building on what you know and developing it, which is really, really awesome. Yeah,
it is. We're fortunate to have that opportunity.
I want to ask a slightly different question about that. What do people misunderstand about what you do? I know that, you sort of tell people what to do, but do people ever come up to you and say, hey, this is what an osteo does, right? And you have to sort of sit and say, well, no, not really. This is actually what we do. Is there like a common misconception about how you work and operate?
I guess when I face that most is from, clients or patients who have, I guess, a certain expectation or a certain experience of what they've found or a service that they've had done at an osteopath. So yeah, that's just where it's really important to be clear in communication. And with, I guess, more experience, you become more confident in your assessment and in your treatment and management to say, look, I understand that you've had X done before. I personally think, Y and Z is the way forward. And, I guess explaining why you would go one way or the next. But usually it's not a problem. Usually, I guess the people who are really kind of firm in what they want, me as a practitioner, I can either say, that's great, we can do that if you like, this is what I'd expect to happen if we go down that path. It's obviously, a client or a patient is coming to see me for my expertise, so it's in my best interest to say what's best for them, sure, based on my practice, based on my service and experience, and you just find a middle ground. Exactly, and that's essentially what I've found myself doing a lot of, just clearly communicating, what I recommend, and usually most clients trust that. And sure, when I guess when you get an outcome to follow that, it's a really rewarding feeling to gain their trust.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would absolutely be getting someone's trust. Absolutely. I want to talk to you about, I guess, maybe your favorite type of person to work with. What that's like, and sort of, if you can, walk us through the process of what it is like when somebody does come to you. So okay, I believe we've spoken in the past about how you like working with, correct me if I'm wrong, functional movement-based, or people that have come in, say, for example, a golfer, for example, who's doing a lot of whatever they're doing. They've got some issue. They're coming to see you. Obviously, they're doing functional movement-based things versus somebody who's just, I have a sore back because I'm sitting in a chair. Is that sort of your favorite type of thing to work with? And what is it like? Walk us through the process for somebody who might not really understand.
Yeah, so that's a good point you raise. You work in a clinic. You work in a busy clinic. So my favorite type of patient is whoever's in front of me. So you don't really get an opportunity to self-select who books in with you. Sure. So yeah, I would say the ones who I guess I respond really well to, and maybe what separates me from the next practitioner would be, as you said, something I guess a little bit more functional something where I guess there's a task involved, such as, I'm sore when I do this, or I'm sore, or it's, more often than not, it's not actually pain. Sometimes it's performance. So if we are talking about golf, for argument's sake,
Sure.
How many athletes I've had and say, I just can't seem to rotate far enough into my backswing. So, I'm assessing why that is. If there's, a mobility restriction, so if there's actually something that's stopping them from doing that, or if it's, I guess, a weakness somewhere, like if you can't generate enough force, strength or stability through a body part. So yeah, I guess you have to understand. Well, it's my job to understand. I guess the biomechanics of that task, or to think on the spot and think what motion is required at what joint. And on top of that, you've got to understand that the person in front of you. And that's probably the biggest learning curve that I've had, kind of delving into this field, is you're only as good as the relationship that you have with your patient. So if there's, I guess, strong trust, as we spoke about before, and if there's a healthy communication channel, usually you can tackle some of those, I guess, pains, inconsistencies in performance, or, deficits in strength that are contributing to their presentation. So what's made them come in.
Gotcha. And so if somebody comes in with something like that,
mm-hmm.
what is that process like? Can we dive into that today?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess on my end, history is really, really important. So really understanding what the person in front of me, what their goals are, what their drivers are, what they want from me, and what would make our interaction successful. And those kinds of questions really cut through like a knife, because it kind of separates, it really forces you as a patient to think, it's almost like a wish list. Like, if I was to get if I was to be really happy, how would I get that? So history is, as I said, one of the more important things, so that I can tailor my service to the client in front of me.
Sure.
And then, as I said, if it is, a task specific presentation, like if we talk about, bending forward and, lifting something, or as you mentioned earlier, playing golf, I'm really big on assessment. So I would watch the client, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, I would watch the client or the patient perform the task. And I, generally speaking, in my first consult, spend a lot more time assessing the client and assessing and diagnosing for myself where I see the problem, and how that relates to the person's pain. Because more often than not, sometimes the spot that they're feeling sore is not the problem.
Right.
Okay. So I'm assessing at what stage of that movement or that task, at what stage is the breakdown, and then I'm really honing in on if it's a tightness or a weakness. So if it's, a mobility restriction, that's that needs some treatment, or if it's a stability, problem that needs some strengthening. And usually, from what I've found, most patients can be kind of funneled into those two options, and then it's just about making sure you're effective. So with your treatments, you're making sure that, I guess, you're treating the right areas in the right plane of motion, and that you're making a change. So that's where I guess a retest would come, where I'd apply a treatment or an intervention, whether that's some hands-on work, whether that's some exercise that generally looks like the task that they need to perform, and then making sure that, the work that I've done or the work that I've given you integrates into that task. So making sure that, the problem you found has been solved, I guess, is the easiest way to outline that.
Lovely. And the period of time between when somebody visits you and when perhaps they've reached that goal that they've got to at the start. I'm assuming that can vary a lot, right? Depending on
100%.
on what it is going on.
100%.
I don't like what I've heard from some people, that the expectation is that they come and see somebody like yourself and I want to be fixed in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen? Can you actually do
always.
it that quick? So you can do it?
So I guess the expectations come that way.
Yeah, sure.
So it really depends. My job is to get, the patient better as quick as possible. So, it's very possible, but, it would have to be, I guess, a fit, healthy system and a fit, healthy individual in front of me who responds well to treatment. I guess it would have to be, usually speaking, mobility restrictions. They generally, resolve quicker. Usually the strength side of things takes a little bit longer to build up and to integrate into the task. So usually if it's just, this spot's sore, this spot's tight, usually if you release that handbrake, it's a quick outcome. And then it's just my job to make sure it stays that way. So whether that's with some exercises, some stretches, these types of things. And the next time I see you, even, if you're not feeling sore, it's still my job to assess, and it's still my job to see, okay, that work that we've done last week or 2 weeks ago, has your body kept that? Do you still have access to that motion? And if so, fantastic. But if not, why has that regressed? And usually it's in those instances that we see, I guess, the site of pain or the site of discomfort is not the problem. And that's where you'd have to assess more and you'd have to continue to problem solve.
That sort of brings me back to my experience when I first came to see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We went through those stages and we figured out at the start that even though it was my shoulder that we were paying attention to, there were some other things that we discovered as we went through assessment and all that sort of stuff. And from my side of things, because I don't know anything about all this sort of stuff, it was quite amazing how you would ask a question and say, are you sore in this particular spot, which was not really to do with my shoulder? And then you would have a feel it around and I'd say, yes, how did you know that? And obviously you've done this a few times before. I just thought it was really cool that you go through those stages and you ask all those questions and then as you go through you can end up fixing the problem.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you had a positive experience, and you were a perfect example. So a background was, you had some shoulder pain that was, I guess, exacerbated from particular movements in the gym. And then we found that we kind of looked into why that was happening. And, there was a range of things from, slight curvature through the spine, and that was affecting, I guess, your shoulder blade and your shoulder stability. So it was a slightly longer journey. But this is, as you would have obviously acknowledged that you've had shoulder pain for years. So usually the time frame that you've had the pain for is generally indicative of, I guess, the process required to get you out of that pain.
Of course.
So you've seen other practitioners and they've given you shoulder treatment, shoulder work, but that hasn't necessarily fixed your shoulder pain. So it was part of my job to identify why that's happening, why this cycle continues to happen. And then make sure I'm giving you the correct intervention to help your shoulder do the things that you couldn't do previously. So, for argument's sake, you were really sore just in a straightforward press. Any kind of pressing motions are quite sore. So we identified and, you know, created a positive change with that. You know, we got you pressing pain-free and you were feeling good, but you said, Jordan, now it's just sore when I do anything overhead. So I guess it's my job to continue to break down those movement patterns and to understand why it's happening, because, you know, the mechanics for a movement like this is very different to the mechanics for a movement like this. There's different planes involved. There are different structures involved, like different body parts involved. So usually that's what you'll find with someone who's had pain for a longer period of time, that, you know, they've got quite a low threshold to start with. Like usually they're quite sore across most tasks. It's my job to really reduce that. So I need the health of that joint or the health of that tissue to improve rapidly, so we can then identify what kind of environment that's still being irritated. So for argument's sake, hey, I'm not sore all the time. I'm only sore when I do this. And that way we can really hone in on, and we can almost check different motions off of the list.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what we did. What I found really interesting was you showing me how I would get myself into these really compromised positions to cater for my pain. And once we went through the process, you said, now all the time I'm always thinking about why is my shoulder moving in this direction when it really shouldn't be in that position. And when I think about what you've told me what to do and what I need to do, I'm now more pain-free. I have less pain in all of those areas of my life where I used to have to think about my shoulder and whatever. Now, because of what we've done, I don't really have to even think about it anymore. Incredible. It's all just tightened up, which is great. Yeah. I want to sort of step back to where you spoke about goals when somebody comes in to see you. When I came to see you, before I came to see you, I didn't really know how to come into the session, in that I didn't really have a goal. Then we had a chat and you spoke to me about, well, where are you pain? Where do you feel pain? What do you do in your life and all that? And we sort of created a goal. Is that a common thing for when people come to see you? Do they not really understand the kind of goals they want? Or do you think that most people are coming in and just saying, yeah, I really want to do this? What's your experience like there?
No, for sure. Part of my job is to, as I did with you, sometimes create a goal based off of what you do most of and when you're most sore. So yeah, that's why sometimes my initial consults are a little bit longer than the next, because some people aren't coming with those front of mind goals, and it's my job to kind of dig them out. So that's where sleep habits come into play, diet, exercise habits, all of those pillars of health, that, work ergonomics and these types of things, things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And, as I mentioned before, pillars of health. Usually that helps me to get an understanding of the person in front of me. And then I guess based off of all of that information, I'm then processing, right, okay, diet's fine, sleep's good. This is the environment that we need to hone in on. And then obviously we need to, dive a little bit more once you have that umbrella of what kind of environment you'll be working in.
The pillars of health, as you just mentioned there, was something I had never experienced going to other people earlier in my life. Is that a Jordan thing, or is that something that an osteopath generally does consider when they're treating patients?
Look, as I said, it's each professional to their own. They're things that we're taught in uni. So I'd like to think that most practitioners would. I think why not? For me, it's so useful and so beneficial that it's more of I suggest everyone does it. But yeah, as I said, it's something we're taught in uni. It's just, I guess, what you pay more attention to. So, I might be paying less attention to, the next thing, but more attention to this, for argument's sake. And, that's the beauty of healthcare, is that each practitioner is going to have their own twist on I guess what's important to them and what information they need to help their service.
My next question was going to be, what's the most important lesson you think you've learned so far in your career? But could it be what you just mentioned then? Could it be thinking about all of those things in a holistic approach instead of just sort of streamlining down there?
Yeah.
Do you have some I guess, life lesson or a career lesson that really stands out?
I think every 6 months you kind of reflect on where you were 6 months ago, and you're in a continual cycle of growth and evolution. Well, I am anyway. So it's a tricky one, because I don't think there's one big lesson. I think there's lots of lessons that come and smack you in the face every day, and ones that you've forgotten about from your first couple of years out that resurface and become a little bit more front of mind. I think the big one, as I mentioned, is paying respect to who's in front of you, and accommodating for them. So really making sure that I guess you're not making the person in front of you fit in your box. So I guess it's my job to have it's what I've tried to do in my career, is have a really wide toolbox, and then select what I prescribe and what I do for whoever's in front of me. And then obviously, client care is utmost. So if the client's still not happy, you have to make sure they are. And if it's not with me, it's with the next person. Yeah,
beautiful. I really like that wide tool set mentality that you have there.
Yeah.
And I think, as we sort of mentioned before, with the age of the internet and being able to do your research and all that sort of stuff, I feel like people's tool sets are becoming wider and wider, which is to the benefit of a lot of other people. I want to pivot slightly. I want you to think about yourself maybe getting into the world when you were studying. Do you have a piece of advice that you would maybe say either to younger Jordan or to maybe people that are going into the similar career that you've gone into? What you can say to them that might help them through their younger years, when they're first starting off, when they're first really learning the ropes? Is there something that stands out?
Yeah, definitely. Observe. Go to experienced practitioners. Become comfortable in a clinic environment if that's where you want to take your career. Find a style that you, or start to think of what type of practitioner that you'll be, if anything. Because if you have those, I guess, thoughts in your subconscious mind during your studies and during your career, I guess you'll be more adept to, I guess, picking up things and lessons from other experienced people who have, and drawing from their experience. Disclaimer, I didn't do that. So my career after I'd graduated, I was, a fully graduated osteopath and practicing. And I would block out time in my diary to go and watch practitioners who had tools that I wanted to learn from and use. And I think that's a really powerful, it's a really powerful tool that you can use to just broaden your understanding and broaden your horizon. And when you're younger, or when you're in uni, that's when you're really you're getting all of this information. It's a great way to visualize how to put it all in practice. So not just, I guess, being passive and waiting until, fourth year, fifth year when you're in the student clinic. Maybe things aren't as busy as you'd like. Take the first step. If you're seeing an osteo now, or if you're seeing a physio now, any kind of healthcare practitioner that they have something that you like, just ask them to go and sit in for a little bit.
When I was at university, one of the things that I wished I did way more of was ask questions.
Ask questions, incredible.
I just shy,
Yeah.
a bit of social anxiety when I was
Yeah.
younger. And there were many examples of, sitting in a lecture, sitting in a lab or whatever, somewhere in a room with a bunch of people, and I want to ask this question. I don't want to sound silly or whatever. And, half the time somebody would ask the exact question that I was going to ask. And I thought, why didn't I just ask the question?
So as a practitioner, as an experienced practitioner who has students coming to watch me, I have younger osteopaths coming to watch me. I actually like when they ask questions. I encourage that, and I try to break down the barriers if there's not, because there has to be questions, and it doesn't it doesn't make anyone think any less of you. It actually makes us think more and want to help, and it helps us to understand how to help you and where you're at. But if you don't ask, you don't know.
No.
And that's really what I've found is those people who are putting their ego aside, they leave it at the door. They're the ones who are really getting the most out of that kind of experience, because they're willing. I know where they're at. We usually have a little debrief after each client, because I think back to when I was doing that. That's when I learned best. I didn't learn best going from one to the next to the next to the next. I'm sure everyone's different, but that's just from my experience. Like, I liked to just take a few minutes to gather my thoughts, to regroup, to reflect on what happened, to think if I had any questions, because sometimes things happen quickly.
That's right.
And to make sure, I guess, there's a safe enough environment to feel comfortable doing that.
And so in your clinic now, you have students coming through. I remember having a session. There was somebody sitting next to us, listening in on that sort of stuff. Do you have students coming in often? Is that just where they flow in and you're able to take them through? They stay for a few weeks. How does that work for them?
Yeah, usually it's just, I guess, I've had some patients who were studying osteo, and they've asked me, hey, look, am I able to sit in?
Oh, beautiful.
That's usually the more authentic way that it happens. Sometimes it's an expression of interest through the clinic. That's generally, I guess, towards the later years of their career, or of their studies, sorry, when they're, coming to the pointy end of exams and prac exams, and really, really trying to get as much, real life experience as possible. So yeah, it varies. It varies, but they're usually the two that are most popular.
I really like seeing students in there in an environment where they're trying to learn it.
Everyone's done it.
Hey, even for example, like I went to, when I was younger, I had a really minor surgery, and there was a young student there, and they asked, could we let the student take blood from you just so they can learn? Of course. Because in my mind, how on earth are these students going to learn if you say no? Like, I don't want that. Yeah. So I really liked seeing somebody here. I really liked seeing that environment, and I'm all about that kind of thing.
And look, we do pay respect to those who aren't comfortable with it. So we understand that people coming to see us might have more sensitive topics or don't feel comfortable in that environment.
Sure.
And that's our priority. So usually that's communicated before the session starts, and we'll ask them essentially. So most people are comfortable. If not, fantastic. Students out, and it's again a safe environment for the client.
So Jordan, I want to maybe take a step back to when you briefly spoke about working with athletes, people that are in the sporting world. My prediction would be that some of these people are not just, let's say, that golfer. They're not just playing golf by themselves. If they're trying to play professionally, they probably have a coach as well. How does that work? Because obviously the coach is going to say, we want to do X, Y, Z to do whatever, and then you're going to prescribe whatever you prescribe. Is there sort of a relationship you develop between yourself,
Definitely.
all three of you there?
Yeah, definitely. So that's where the magic happens, and that's where you start to develop a team where everyone's on the same page. So that's my highest priority, and I guess I already have those networks with some golf coaches, with some personal trainers, with some online coaches who need some help with their clients, or in reverse, someone comes to see me. One of the first questions I'm asking, if it's a sports injury, do you have a trainer? Do you have a health professional that you're working with? Just so I can open that communication channel. Because, as I said, the more feedback and the more interaction from me to the coach, the less the patient or the less the athlete or the less the client has to think about it. And it's not their job to think about their injury, or it's our job. So also to make sure that, as I touched on, everyone is on the same page. It can be quite confusing having, on a Tuesday going to your osteopath saying one thing, and on a Wednesday going to your golf coach and them saying the other thing. So that's where I'm on the phone. Usually phone call works best. Phone call, text, and I'm explaining what I've found from my assessment, what I've treated or what kinds of intervention I've placed for the client, and why I've done that, and then making sure that it ties in with their plan as well. So it's not my job to override. It's my job to collaborate. So that's usually where I would say, right, this golfer is like, I just yesterday I had one of my golf coaches come in, and we were talking about a mutual client, and he's currently on tour, on doing some pro-ams, and he's got quite a high load at the moment. He's playing a lot, so between coach and osteo, I'm saying, right, I've actually got to lessen his output. I've actually got to lessen his what kind of stability work he's doing, because he's already functioning at quite a high capacity, and we don't want those to intervene each other. So yeah, they're the kinds of changes and communications that I make, and they're essential. And I love those relationships, because it's easy. Because when you have someone that you trust, it's very easy to say, go see this person. Or when it's easy to communicate, or when someone trusts you, you say, hey, I've found this and it's affecting this, and maybe this is why that's happening. And it's like, cool, I'm going to then use that and integrate that in my service, so patient is getting the same information.
That's awesome for the patient as well, because it's almost like they have you checking in on them multiple times instead of just coming in for one session with you, because you get feedback from the coach, and that all sort of, the communication just runs in a circle between the three of you guys. And that's usually a lot of my management is not in the treatment room, so there are tools and methods and ways of checking in that I'll use for those who need it, and who like that communication, because it's very difficult sometimes to get an outcome in 30 minutes a week, let's just say. Sometimes there does need to be quicker communication. So like, hey, how did this feel? How did this exercise feel? Yep, it felt the same as when we did it together. Awesome. Tick. You still feeling good? Tick. If not, saying, hey, I couldn't actually quite recreate that feeling. Cool. Send me a video.
Why is that happening? Because by the time we wait for your next session, you would have already done that, 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
Depending on, where the client's at. So usually for those tweaks and usually for that, I want to make sure my work is as efficient as possible and effective as possible. So it's not always done face to face.
And I got a true taste of that, and I'm not saying I'm an athlete or anything at all like that, but you now have the ability with coaching apps online, the way of doing this online, that you can check in with people.
Of course.
You were able to check in with me. How are your movements going? The exercises I've prescribed you. How's pain going? How's that feeling? And I didn't have to come here as often, and I still felt like you were there for me to help me through that part of my treatment. Is that online service that you're providing now something that you're doing more and more of? Do you see that growing? How is that working for you?
Yeah, look, I'm getting I enjoy it. That's the most important thing. I enjoy it and I get good outcomes with it. And it's important to touch that generally it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid. There are some things I can't do online.
Of course.
And that's why it's really important to have spaces like here. I also, where I can say, right, something's not adding up. We need some more assessment. Come in face to face. But definitely for those, individuals, who have limited access to come into a clinic, but still want that really close communication. I find really positive outcomes with it. I'm able to, we've got a communication, we've got an inbox. I'm, sending you check-in forms each week, which are personalized and individualized, based off of my knowledge of your presentation. So how did your shoulder feel when you were sleeping? How did your shoulder feel when you were lifting? Kind of all those questions that I need to know to track your progress. We've got some metric scales, some pain rating scales in that. And most importantly, those forms collate as a summary. So over 1 month, over 2 months, over 3 months, we can see averages of what your readings are, and we can see how your progress is trending. So I like to get people better, and that's really, objective ways of doing that. Like, hey, 4 weeks ago you were at this rating, and we've moved in the right direction. So it's great for the patient to see that. And I'm also, sending weekly videos. I'm also sending, check-in videos to, provide different intervention or provide new intervention if something's not effective. And that's something we always accommodate for as practitioners. Like, hey, I'm actually not doing that well. Either something's new happened or it's just not happening. And that's something you encounter on a daily basis, really. So it's right back to the drawing board. Where's the breakdown and why is it happening? And usually it's a really effective way of not letting that progress too long. So quick intervention is, generally speaking, the most effective intervention, and that online platform gives me the access to do that.
Beautiful. That was possibly one of my favorite things. Once we figured out what was going on with me, it just felt like you were there. And like if I ever felt some different thing, or I've gone through a movement and I felt a certain way, I just tell you straight away.
And that's the benefit, because as you would have experienced, the rehab that I gave you, I just recorded that and uploaded it onto. And I created that as a program for you, and I assigned those exercises on particular days and times actually that worked around your schedule.
Yeah.
So you were saying, right, I want to train at this time in the day because I've got this and this going on. I'm like, cool, easy. What time do you have? Half an hour, 10 minutes, an hour. What's the session look like for you? And you're getting notified to do it. And if not, obviously each week I'm checking what you've logged and your compliance and these types of things. So it's just a good way of me to track, is my work effective or not? Or is it just the fact that you haven't had time to integrate it? And, in that instance, we can't really, it's more difficult to gauge how, I guess, your progress, essentially.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's probably what I'd say. So I don't want to change my strategy or, the body part I'm treating or how I'm treating it if there hasn't been enough time to integrate. So as long as that's tracked, there's no problem either way, but it's just information that's hand and useful to me.
For sure. Bit of a pivot here. Group activities.
Do
you offer that sort of thing if somebody might not want to come in by themselves?
Yeah.
Workshops, the things of that nature where you've got a big group of people together. Is that something that you also...
Yeah, definitely. So that's something that I've been working on for a while.
Okay.
And that's a service that hopefully I can tailor more to, athletes of interest, whether it's some strength and conditioning, whether it's, particularly for golf, whether it's particularly for lifting. I guess I work a lot with powerlifters as well. There's a local gym nearby that I see a lot of their clients. And I'm actually, in the process of going to their gym and providing a workshop, like a lifting workshop. And that's just essentially, based on, safe lifting mechanics and effective lifting mechanics. So, or I guess I should say efficient lifting mechanics. So it really caters towards those performance athletes who aren't sore, but they want to be better. And that can be across multiple different sports. I work a lot with tennis players. I did a lot of work with the Melbourne, the tennis world in Melbourne Park. And I essentially just set up a stall, like a little workshop, and I did movement assessments for them. So I assessed, forehand, backhand, serve, and I broke down each region and each joint, and I gave them a little tick spreadsheet as to if you're tight or weak in this region and what shot that would affect. So let's just say, stiff in thoracic extension and rotation, and a weak shoulder, that would affect your serve, for argument's sake. And I found that a really useful tool to connect with more of those athletes and clients who I work well with and who value my services a lot. And it's work that I'll be continuing to do. There's a gym in the city, Melbourne Central, Fitness First, that I'll be going to later in July, and I'll be setting up a little workshop there and doing, again, movement assessments, postural assessments for their members. So that's something I'm always open to, interested in. I like to connect. I like to see people and have a chat with them. So that's generally something that I'm looking to branch out more into.
Lovely. Well, Jordan, thank you very much for today, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
We'll wrap things up here.
Great.
You're going to be jumping on socials very shortly.
Yes.
I'll put that link in the description here.
Great.
For the meantime, how can people find you if they want to have a chat with you and get in touch?
Yeah. Well, I'm currently practicing from 2 different clinics. So primarily in Coburg. So that's Coburg Osteopathy. And the second is in the city. So that I'm 2 days in the city. That's at Melbourne Osteo Sports Injury Centre. Both of those you can find online, just with a Google search. Both of those have websites as well. And as you mentioned, I'll be on social media. So generally, either of those options are fine. If you wanted to have a chat, you can either request an email or phone call through those clinics, or contact me directly through social media.
Lovely. Perfect. Links will be down in the description. Thanks again, Jordan. We'll wrap it here.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.